All right, we are now joined on the Soccer Hour, brought to you by your NorCal Honda dealers. It is Todd Yeagley, the head coach of the men's soccer program for Indiana. He is Mr. Hoosier. He has built an incredible program there, or else he's been part of an incredible program there. I don't want to take anything away specifically from your DNA, but yeah, man. I mean, you've had some incredible successes there. Obviously you had I guess we could call that a frustrating end of the season this year, although I go naive. If you're in the cup final, you've done your job pretty darn well. I guess I'll start off with this. Is this the lone time of the year where you can like exhale and chill out?
There's a few windows. This is one. With the season going to the end, which was obviously a phenomenal run that the team had. A little bit of business runs into the holidays, so you get a little bit less downtime. But I wouldn't trade that for the alternative, which would be an early exit. Yeah, this is a good time. Got to spend some time with the family. The recruiting is cycled a little bit differently these days, so it's used to have more holiday recruiting. Now it's not as much, which is good. But I appreciate it. Yeah, we're very fortunate. This, as you mentioned on the front end, this is our 50th season of varsity, and I was born into it. This is my 50th year, celebrating my birthday this year, and what my father and really my mother was very instrumental in, along with some very loyal coaches and our passionate alumni. Is this has been a really unique program. For 50 years, we've been able to be consistently at the top, and that's really hard to do. And so many things have to come together for that to happen. But for us to celebrate our 22nd Final Four in 50 years this season kind of says it all across the decade. So, I was a young kid in the program. I played at IU. I was an assistant, and now the head coach. So I've been in every role you can imagine, and our alumni are special. And obviously my time in MLS was really special as well, which got to meet so many different people from all over. But so much of it goes back to Indiana in the end.
Did you ever think about staying longer term at Wisconsin just to try and carve out something a little bit different? Or was it pretty hard that when Indiana came calling to say like, hey, I have a chance now to be a part of a greater legacy? Because it's something I understand. Like before we started rolling, I said, yeah, my dad was a broadcaster for the Earthquakes. Like that's something that I take great pride in and would definitely play in if some other job came and be like, do I want to walk away from that? Just because you do get to be part of a continuation like that. Not everybody has that chance to build a legacy or even extend upon it. So did the thought cross your mind after that 1 year?
When I went to Wisconsin, I felt we could. One, it's a great institution. We could win there, and they had years prior.
Yeah.
Great place to raise a kid, and I always knew that if Indiana were to become available, it'd be always very hard to say no, and really didn't expect it to be in a season. But all the reasons not to go were reasons of fear, and like anything in life. You have to take risks and you have to kind of put yourself out there. And when I say fear, it'd be more of, can you live up to, the legacy that your father created? And when you compare, that's when it gets dangerous.
Yeah.
And all I knew is I felt I could do the job as well as anyone. And I knew I would put as much into the job, and I could connect with all the people that made this special. That's what I focused on, not on the wins and the trophies, because you'll never catch my father. I mean, he's a one and only, and you don't have that in sports often. But his 544 wins, I don't know will be ever matched, and nor do I even look at the number of wins. And I stay very present. Our SID often will come to me after the game. He knows that, and he'll give me a little snippet of maybe what we just did. Whether it's our 800th career win for a program this year. I had no idea. I don't really pay attention to kind of the historical marks in process. We have to reach this. Yeah. It's more just trying to help the program continue to stay at the top. And that's the wins and losses are, as we say, they're a byproduct of what the culture creates. And we're just very fortunate that we have an unbelievably strong, vibrant culture here at IU, and that continues to attract top talent. People that are like-minded want to be here, and people that want to win and be part of that. There's an attraction, and I'm just fortunate to be in charge of it right now.
So I'll segue from that to, that obviously people want to come to Indiana for a number of reasons. A, it's a phenomenal program. B, campus is unbelievable. I've been there because my brother went there. And then I've also been to Wisconsin, where you also coached, because I went there for the CrossFit games to broadcast those. And you really can't go wrong in either of those campuses. Like, you've gotten to work in maybe the two most beautiful campuses in the country. And I know my friends at Stanford will probably yell, and at Cal are probably yelling at me right now, and Santa Clara. I digress. But I mean, you go to Indiana, it's an incredible place, and you're attracting the best talent because people know the legacy and everything that's going on there and how consistent you guys are. Tell me about Daniel Munie, who the San Jose Earthquakes just drafted, who was not really on the radar of anyone at the end of his high school career, and yet your program saw something. I think he said that he went to a camp there that his mom said, "Oh, go to this, maybe they'll get a look at you," and it turned into him flourishing, I think, beyond what anyone really could have imagined. You might disagree. You might say that everyone has that, you see something in every player, but he went from being a guy that was not recruited to being a top 10 pick in the MLS Super Draft. I mean, that's a wild story. And he even said that he almost thought he was done with soccer after high school. So I don't know how much you remember about the process of bringing him in, but if you could try and just encapsulate how exactly that transformation occurred, because it's still, I love it, but it's always like, I didn't see it happen. So I wonder what exactly happened.
Yeah, these stories, they need to be talked about. They need to be, the light needs to be shown, shine on these moments. I mean, I'm looking into my office and I see the All-American wall. We have some great players. Many of you have broadcasted in the MLS. But some of the players on here were the Daniel Munie story, where they came from a very humble starting point. And yet we also have, players in the wall that were, youth national team members that went on to have MLS careers, the Ned Grabovoys of the world, that were a known factor. Everyone wanted Ned Grabovoy, for instance. But back to Munie, he was on a very good team, playing next to Jack Mayer and Aiden Stanley, two players that have played in the league and flourishing. And Daniel was this really raw, athletic kid that just kind of did his thing. He's very quiet-natured. My assistant, Kevin, who's from St. Louis, watches a lot of the St. Louis talent, always wants to bring, that's been a hotbed for us. And he kept saying, he's like, man, this Munie kid, we had Jack committed. And even Jack said, Munie's he's a really great kid. And he really rated him. So we kept watching. And then we said, hey, he hadn't committed anywhere. It's his senior year. We liked his athletic profile. We said, come to the ID camp, which we have in this next week coming up. And he came to it. And we're like, holy cow, why is this kid not committed somewhere? I mean, this is January of his senior year. I mean, you can't make this stuff up when you look at what he's done. Those kids are swallowed up their sophomore, junior year. And he didn't even know how good he was. Didn't even really know how much the process really entailed. And after the event, we said, Daniel, we'd love to get you back. We really like you. We'd love for you to be part of our class. And we try to speed track it from there. He had another ID camp he went to. That program actually didn't show much interest after that camp. So about 3 weeks later, next thing you know, he's on campus, gave him an offer, and he was committed. Wow. And I don't know if he knew how good he was. We did see something special, but I'd be lying to you to say I saw a top 10 draft pick. I saw a 2-time player of the year in the conference. I just saw a really unique athlete who, when you don't know how good you are and you're that humble and you have tools, you want to work with a kid like that. And he redshirted like some other All-Americans that have done here. And he waited and he was patient, and his time came. In 19, he took off. COVID season, then he had another level of progression. And then here we are in his senior year. And he clearly showed again, once he got healthy, because a little bit of a minor setback this year with health with his hamstring, he was a premier center back, and he's got more to go, which I told that to the many of the MLS coaches and staffs, like, he's not done. He still has growth. So where he ends up, who knows what we'll be talking about with Daniel Munie that years ahead. But these stories need to be told, because there are kids out there that are like, man, I haven't been recruited yet, or, I haven't made a team, or it's just like, you never know when your time's coming, and everyone's path is different. And he didn't compare himself along the way to like, oh, this kid was on a team and why am I not? Or he just went out and played. And some of that naiveness also came to help him. And like many of our St. Louis kids, he loves sports and he loves watching a cards game as much as he did a soccer game back in his youth days.
Yeah.
So you got a really good one. Great kid with, again, a wonderful upside. He is not tapped out, not even close.
To watch all these players from your program get drafted year after year, like, I know that you probably take that as like, that's your job. You're trying to develop them as students and making them into better men and making them into better athletes and, parts of our society. But there has to be a part of you that thinks like, man, like, this is pretty cool. Like, we have these players that are representing Indiana that I can say like, hey, I'm part of that development that's leading these guys into a path to professional soccer. Because right now, I would imagine that for collegiate coaches, with the rise of all the academy systems, I won't say the waters have been muddied, but I would say that it's made your job that much more difficult, especially as I feel it's never been harder to win in collegiate soccer. I feel like every program every year is getting better and better and better. I was talking to Jerry Smith about this, the head coach of the women's program at Santa Clara, and he's like, yeah, you're right. He's like, it is never harder to win. He's like, everybody's getting better. The amount of information out there for every coach to tap into, is just that much. There's that much more that they can put to their use. So I like, just how do you view it right now in terms of developing these talents and in terms of knowing that there is the rise of all these academy systems? Like, it's harder, right?
It's a different era than like my father. My father, obviously, he comes to practice. He's here. He's very much present and sees things from his vantage. And we speak a lot about it. And other coaches that have maybe who were more in the 80s and 90s that are still coaching, very different landscape. So you have to pivot. You have to adapt. I think what we've done a great job of is not losing core values of what's important to the makeup of our team. That first and foremost, and that also attracts other top kids that want that. But the combination of the development piece is still something that we put a lot of premium on. And a lot of them are late bloomers or ones that maybe haven't had a chance yet. And there's like that desire you see in them that attracts us. And it's almost something like we're looking for the ones that haven't quite broken in. It might be a national team. That's Jack Mayer just underneath it. But man, he was driven, to a kid that maybe just got on the top club team in his city, his senior year. Those examples, and maybe they'll scale differently in our program, but that's what those types of qualities we're looking for. And you take tons of pride in seeing, Roman Celentano wasn't even starting for his club team until his senior year for the Sockers, because he was behind another really good keeper. And Roman was someone that we saw like, man, this kid's got some tools. And yeah, he's a number 2 pick is 2 years in college. And you're like, we helped him along that journey. Not a massive part, but we did a little piece of that. And then you have some that come in, that you would expect to be, a Griffin Dorsey who came in and was already a national team player. He just needed to fine tune. And he was a top 10 pick as well. So all of them have come in different ways. We've also been fortunate to still do it with predominantly American players, which you talk about the landscape changing. That's really where it's changed the most. The international influence in our game is helping college soccer 100%, but also making it more challenging to do it with primarily domestic players. Yeah. Because your club, along with many others now, some of them are taking them before they come to college. And the young American has these dreams, which they should, maybe a little bit narrow-sighted on the probability of making it. But the dream is there for them. And thank God they have that visual. They have the MLS to now want to be. And And so whether it's a Brennan Aronson who was committed to us, that got the opportunity before he came to college, it made sense for him.
Yeah.
It did. And we still stay in touch. We're still close. And I never felt like he chose the path and we felt bitter about it. It's like he was developed that fast, that late, that he needed to go. But some still see a college as a pathway, 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons. So Aiden Morris was the youngest player to start an MLS Cup final. He played 1 season for us. He was ready. I would have been selfish to say, Aiden, man, you need 3 more years here at IU. He was ready to be a pro.
Yeah.
He just needed a little bit of tuning, and we helped him a small bit. He goes to Columbus, and he starts an MLS final his rookie year. And then there's the Daniel Munie example, that he could arguably have a long MLS career, but did it in a different path, did it at a different time, in a way different timeline. And that's what I find really fun.
Yeah.
And I'm passionate about the different pathways. And that's what gets challenging, as you alluded, is you might have a player for 1 year. You can't do that. You can't sustain a program if you do that exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have, you need your 4th and 5th year guys. Like Ryan Wittenbrink was a redshirt. He just got better. And now he was drafted by Dallas, and he had a phenomenal senior, really 2 seasons that he kind of took off. You need that player to be ready. So when you lose the one player that's maybe a one and done, then you can fill it. And so we didn't have to go out and find a 21-year-old. We just waited for Ryan Wittenbrink to be ready. And he was just developing behind the scenes. And so for that team makeup, we love that. We love that about our program, and we want to continue that. It's getting harder, though, because, as you mentioned, the teams that are predominantly international, they'll lose a player and they'll immediately get another one that's older, more experienced, and probably better than the American equivalent. And so we're trying to find that balance as we move forward.
It is really interesting to note, though, that when a Jackson Ewell was drafted out of UCLA by the Earthquakes, or a Tanner Beeson, or even talking with Daniel, versus some of the younger kids who have signed these homegrown contracts at 14, 15, 16 years old. And they are mature beyond their years, don't get me wrong, but there is a huge difference between somebody who's 20, 21, 22 and has played in those big collegiate games and has been in the big stadiums and already has some national TV exposure, versus a kid. Like, I remember when I was 14, 15, 16, if somebody had said, like, here, Ted, sign a giant check and go for play in front of 20,000 people in the Bay Area, I'd been like, come again? Like, yeah. It's amazing, because, like, again, they are mature beyond their years. Their talents have prepared them for that, and they know the pressure's on. But it is very interesting talking to these guys who have been through the college experience versus the really young kids. They're so much more prepared for it. And again, I'm not telling everybody should go down their own path, but it is decidedly different. There's the wide eyes aren't there the same way, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. And the coaches know that. I mean, this is a business, and in the end, they're some of these early signings are protecting assets, and yet the ones that really have the best interest of their kids and really have a long-term vision, and hopefully clubs can do that, which is harder these days because some of these coaches are in or out and staffs are in out pretty quick, is going, you know what, maybe they needs to, let's see them mature for 2 years in college. Let's let them have a new voice. Let's have them have a new role. Mm-hmm. Let's have them play in some atmospheres the kids never played in besides some academy showcase events, to see how he handles that. And you see the rise, and maybe other times you don't, and maybe there's a red flag. Maybe that's a player that maybe we shouldn't make a move on that player, and therefore they can continue in their college career and graduate and have a different path. But that's the dual path. I mean, we are the best dual pathway, and the rest of the world sees it. That's why the internationals are coming to us.
Yeah,
they see this dual. They see these other international peers of theirs come to the U.S., have success in college, get signed by whether it's a second team of an MLS or USL, or maybe make it to MLS, which is harder. But they're like, man, I can still get my degree, and I can have an experience. And you do grow a lot in college. We all know that, different than just being in a locker room. And I had some teammates of mine at the Crew that came in early And man, they could have really benefited from a couple of years, not just the soccer piece of college, just growing up.
Yeah.
And handling the diversity of what a pro locker room is going to be. And we can help them get through some bumps that, man, when it's your job, those bumps become, you're done.
Yeah.
You're not done here. You just maybe don't go on a trip, or I sit you next to me for a game. The life lessons that you learn do help you as a pro.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some ones that, like I mentioned earlier, Brennan Aronson should have gone pro and bypassed college. He was ready.
Yeah.
But there's some of those that aren't clear cut. We have such a unique opportunity in our country, and the coaches and the technical staffs that have seen it, they do know that there are top programs that can be that, it's as MLS, I always say to them, you have a free, that doesn't happen often, developmental tool in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And like many of the other college coaches, our goal for the ones that are aspirational is we want them to be in our league. We don't want them to go. And I see kids, come to our program and say, what's your ultimate goal? I'd love to play in Europe. I said, well, let's be really good here first.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, guess what? MLS will come calling. And guess what? When you do really well there, here's your examples already that you've seen make it to Europe. Just trust the process. You don't need to go to Europe at 17 and think that you're going to make it, because likelihood you're not. So I love the process of the kids just moving up the chain. And if you're that good, then you will move and you will be seen. You just need the platform. You need a platform to be seen. You need the platform to, be apples to apples. They can compare you to similar players. And I think the college game provides a lot of those tools for the pro coaches to go, okay, now I see him do it with older, more experienced players, besides just in the academy setting or in with the first team. Mm-hmm. It's different when you're there with the first team as just the young academy guy. Like, there's no pressure. All of a sudden now there's pressure of like, I need Aiden Morris to run our midfield as a freshman. He's 17. Aiden, you need to be our guy. I was pressuring that kid, and he loved it. And he never felt that much pressure. And it did help him in his development, along with some other small details that he got from his time here. But that, I think, can be really replicated, obviously, certainly other places. But I think that, getting back to your point, we all are about helping these kids. I love seeing these kids make it to MLS. And it's getting harder and harder for them to make it, which I think will probably be the flip in the script in the years ahead, will be why so many of the international kids are coming. Mm-hmm. Is they've seen their peers not make it, and they know that there's a dual path that maybe I need to get ready for life outside of soccer. And with our American kids, at some point that will flip a little bit. They'll maybe have a dual thought of like, okay, soccer is a dream, but also getting a good education is one heck of an insurance policy for life. And obviously that's part of our job, is to help educate.
You talk about the pressure, when you were playing in college, I don't know for certain, but I don't think most of the games were televised. I know there wasn't social media. I know there wasn't podcasts. I know that soccer circles have always talked, but like, you have kids now who, the starting goalkeeper for the United States men's national team, who just excelled in the World Cup, almost quit because he was on SportsCenter's Not Top 10. And we know these kids are getting discussed on podcasts, and their games are getting broken down once they're like 14, 13, 12 years old at a width that was never there. Like, again, soccer circles always talked, but now, the amount of blogs, the amount of newsletters, the amount of podcasts, I won't say it disturbs me, but I worry, because I have kids who are, they're not getting any younger. They are 9 and almost 7. And I think, boy, when my oldest guy in 4 years, for whatever sport that he decides to focus on, or maybe he won't, he'll be playing multiples. Like, do I want people dissecting his game? Like, it's a really, like, I imagine for you probably got to worry about that with your own players, because they can probably, go to Instagram and there might be a play of them getting nutmegged or something. Right. Like, and like we all have to live with our failures in our heads. We ruminate, especially athletes. That's why the best ones are so good at forgetting. But how do you forget when you flip on your phone and then all of a sudden there you are? Maybe not even making a mistake, but maybe just not even having a great game. Like it can be relatively innocuous, but it can still get in your head.
It's the blessing and the curse, right? And look at, talking about platforms and who's watching. 15 years ago, Andrew Gutman doesn't get signed over in Scotland out of college directly with no tryout if it wasn't for the platform of what we're on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every game, there's scouts everywhere. All of the coaches have the technology to watch every touch, every movement of our players when they're making decisions. And therefore, you're having a top European club signing an American player out of college without a trial just shows that you never know who in the heck is watching. And I'm so glad Andrew is back in MLS. This is, I think, where he belongs, but that was his first path. And he ended up coming back kind of in a creative way. But to your point, there is pressure. They're getting the experience of, Daniel Munie's had interviews. He's had people ask him tough questions, relatively tough questions. It's going to help him in the pros. I mean, that's part of your job, is to handle, besides on the field, of, man, what are these people thinking and saying, and what am I being asked, and all the different directions, and how you handle yourself. And we talk to our guys all the time. I go, your social media is a platform for you, but it's also, be very careful, because there'll be a lot of love and there'll be a lot of hate in between. I go, I learned that as a player. I go, I kind of broke in when social media was just getting started, and I had a curiosity that took me to an online blog. It might have been the soccer one, the big soccer, whatever it was. And I go, I learned the hard way, because after a good game, man, they love you. But after you don't do well, you're the worst player they've ever seen. And so I didn't go back because really it isn't reality. So I go, use your social media as a platform to help get your voice out, but don't be looking at things to feel praise, because honestly, some of it is going to be shallow, and many of the negative hits are unjustified. Because they don't know what's really going on. And everyone is obviously able to throw in an opinion when they're behind an account or a name. So, it's what's one of the reasons I actually don't have social media myself. I mean, I try to kind of show our team. I say it's important for you to learn how to use it properly. We have great training at IU, because there's name, image, likeness opportunities. It's branding. It's their world. They have to. But I am the only coach that doesn't have a Twitter account and that actively is on it, or I just don't go into that world, mainly because a lot of it is just stuff that you just kind of waste your time in.
It's true.
So it's hard. It's harder to do. Now I have a ghost account for news that I just go and I look at stuff so I can get news, but that's just the way I get a little flack from that. From people. But the reality is also IU Soccer is our brand. So if I want something to go out, I just have it pushed out through our IU Soccer account. So we can still get things out that we need to. But I don't think people need to know what I'm having for dinner, and I don't think that people really should even care.
I'll let you know what people say after they listen, and they'll say, oh, you know what was Todd having that night? But
yeah. So I guess I'm a little old school in that sense, but I totally get it. And I want our players to have it. And getting back to your point about the training that they get, I mean, that's part of now, what we do here at Indiana, other top programs, is that they're getting like a little taste. I mean, our media department here at IU is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, they cover our games as well as maybe what it was early MLS years. I mean, I'll have 7 people interviewing us after a game. And Mike, we barely had that in early MLS years.
Yeah.
So they're constantly on social media. They're doing podcasts with IU Sports Media. I mean, they're getting prepped for these moments where they aren't timid. They have a little experience. So they can go into a pro environment and be able to show some personality and be able to give the fans more than maybe they would as a naive 16, 17-year-old.
When I talked to Daniel last week, I could definitely tell he was in the midst of processing everything that had gone on, being drafted and dealing with that. But talking to him, I was like, well, Good. I was like, the Earthquakes managed to draft the one player with a deeper and maybe louder voice than I had. I was like, this guy sounds so in command of everything that's coming out of his mouth. So he was prepared well in that sense. And, I am excited to see what his career holds, because that's always the fun part, is not knowing what's going to happen next. And I love the fact that we have guys at the Earthquakes from Indiana, and we've got UCLA, we've got Stanford, we've got Clemson, got Georgetown. I mean, you go down the list, you got these big programs. And I will say it's interesting in getting to know you now, and I know Jeremy Gunn a little bit, and like I said, Jerry Smith I've gotten to know over the years. Like, there's a lot of the things that you guys will, it's the Venn diagram. You're not entirely the same, but there are some overlapping themes. It doesn't happen by accident. Like, how much do you, I mean, obviously your dad was a huge influence, but how much do you talk to the other coaches around the college landscape? Because I know that's not always easy to do, because when it's your competitor, they're your competitor, but I know that there's connections you had with so many of these guys before they were your rival coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mutual respect that we have in the game, and I think we're on the road a lot recruiting, and you'll see us all typically engaged in having good conversations, and whether it's serving on some other committees that I serve on, that other coaches you mentioned, Jeremy, who's on it, a very sharp guy, and
yeah.
He's done a phenomenal job at Stanford, and we have a great rivalry in the sense we played in big games against each other, and we're both competitive. But I think there's a lot of mutual respect for obviously what he's done at Stanford, and obviously what we're trying to keep going here at Indiana. But there is a bit different collegial, experience that you have even in college soccer versus what you might have in even college football or basketball, where there is a lot of gentlemen. Or things that other sports wouldn't do, where it becomes much more of a business, and that time will come certainly for kids that are going the pro route. But you like to see in college, there'll be the days where you can have some really good, honest conversations about challenges you have, and not feel like it's always being used against you in some way of recruiting. And so that I think that is unique to our landscape, and I'm sure the women feel the same way. And I hope that doesn't change. But the days of, my father would tell me he would go and he'd play UConn and these early days of coaching, and he would play a racquetball game the day before with the coach. Wow. That's not going to happen today.
No.
I mean, think about it, right? It's like you pull into the city, and you imagine I pull into, playing Stanford. I'm like, hey, Jeremy, want to come out and play a little racquetball? And I mean, the competitive juices that you already have. So it's such a funny way that still through the years things have changed, and not always say for the better, but times change with it, and so the days of where maybe my father would be doing that with he'd have the coaches over for our tournament. We always still do the Adidas Classic. We invite two teams typically out of region. Like this coming up here, it's going to be Washington's one of the teams there. So we've had this event for so many years, and my father would always invite always other top teams, and they would come over to our house and typically have like a social the day before the game, and like those days just you're not doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, so I got to meet all these fantastic. That's probably how I first met Bruce Arena, was probably him over at my house.
Jesus.
Before the Classic. Because that's what the other coaches did, and they had agreed that was an important thing or something that they did. So we do it in different ways now, but certainly the times have changed, but some of those connections that you make, and I guess that's something that we feel is still very important at IU, is just we all compete, but we do everything we can to keep the relationships with our peers, and to move the game, and to continue to have dignity and class within our profession. Because if that slips, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I had a phenomenal mentor with my father that there's certain things you don't do, and you don't take a shortcut to win a game and do something that would be classless in a sense, to make it simple. And I do my best to teach our team that, and our coaches, that there are ways to do things. And when it comes old fashioned, it's just doing things the right way.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
And we do have a heck of a lot of coaches that do that. I'm really proud of our peers, but there you will see some that will delve into different areas, and sometimes it's the younger coach that maybe didn't have the mentor or just trying to move up quicker, and often will backfire.
Well, I've still got you because I know that we start off by talking about your downtime, and now I'm eating all your downtime. But just your memories of the early days of MLS. Like I said, I texted Dunny last week, and I said, Dunny, I was like, we just drafted one of Todd Yeagley's guys. I'm going to have him on for an interview, and he immediately just goes, "Oh, great guy." He's like, "You'll love talking to him." And I, told Joe earlier today, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be talking to Todd Yeagley." He's like, "Oh, gentleman, always one of the nicest dudes." Like, I feel like everybody who did play in the early days between 1996 and about 2006, that everybody literally knows each other. Like, that's the other thing I've noticed. And some, great stories, great guys. Like, how many of the old players do you still talk to?
A lot. And I do feel like there's a different bond that we had, because all of us just felt lucky to have a job playing pro soccer. I mean, I was, to be honest, the American player, unless you were one that maybe had come back, like a Tab Ramos or a Paul Caligiuri, who I played with, or players like that who had already kind of made it in Europe. The rest of us, the younger ones, were just like, man, we finally have a league. I grew up seeing NASL, and it was just this vision. And obviously some of our IU players played in. I went to a Sting game and saw what that looked like. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and like similar when you started watching MLS, and obviously it went away. And, we had a good league, and there was an indoor league that kind of filled a void for a while, but here it is back. And I feel like the luckiest guy in the world. Like, it came back right at the age that I had a chance at it.
Yeah.
And I felt like I felt in time just a really lucky guy to be in those. But the bond you had with those guys, and everything was so pure. There wasn't this massive amount of money in these contracts that I'm so happy that there are now for the players. But we just did it in a different way. And the time we spent together, whether it was after the game, we would spend hours with our fans. And it wasn't like, man, we got to do this. It was like, no, this is great. These people want to hang out with us, and they're paying to come watch us play. It was like a genuine, just really love and appreciation for our fans. Yeah. And we got to know them on a personal level. And we still joke to this day, like those days doing we'd sign autographs every game. And by the time I left, that started to change. You'd only do 4, because what happened was these other players came in like, "What do you mean we're doing this for free? We're getting paid for this." We'd go do appearances out in some random community at 2 p.m, in the middle of the summer, and you got 0. You maybe get a fan, and that was cool. So yeah, I think, Brian and others that you mentioned, we lived in the MLS in a different time so many reasons we're so happy where we are today, but you also can't replicate those days. And that's what I will always find special. And that's the bond I think a lot of us have of some of the funny struggles of, whether, this is just one, but we literally are at Ohio State training on their rec fields. That was a training field for us. And we show up, and there's a frisbee, like a frisbee golf game going on by the students. And they're like, "What are you guys doing? Like, we have this field reserve." We're like the pro team playing the stadium right there. Like, we don't care. So, you literally, you just can't make this stuff up today.
No.
We're playing on an intramural field at Ohio State for our training for some of our early years. And then you fast forward, and it's like you get guys complaining about the silliest things that back then we would have been happy that we had a training field.
Yeah. Do you ever look at the fact that you're in charge of a big time program in collegiate soccer, that Chris Leach is the general manager of a major league soccer team? Like I said, Brian Dunseth, he's a ESPN regular, or any Fox Sports, doing these huge national broadcasts. Yeah, do you reflect when you see things like that? Like when Chris Leach is talking to you about drafting one of your players, or other guys that are on Major League Soccer, like, do you take a moment to reflect? Because I know you said you're not looking at the Indiana stuff and the wins and everything, because that's your work. Whereas we're talking about something like you guys each now have a place in the pantheon of American soccer that you all helped build. Like that's a different thing to look at, because it's not necessarily it's your success, but it's because you all had collective success that it's now you're part of something greater, I guess.
Yeah, this is it's a really fun age, because as I'm getting older, some of the guys that were younger than me in the league are now in such really cool roles in the spectrum. Whether that, just my own class. Just at IU, you have head of marketing for Adidas, Chris McGuire. He's in charge of all North America. And you have, the CFO, or basically in charge of a CMO, I should say, of U.S. Soccer, Dave Wright, who was at Indiana with us. And obviously Brian, obviously at Ohio State, and played a lot of years in the World Cup. Those are just a couple guys in our own class.
Yeah.
That you see, and then you magnify that with all the different relationships, as you mentioned, with the Brian Dunsets, the guys you got to play with or against. And you're like, oh man, okay. Yeah, I talked to Aleko about signing, the Generation Diaz guys, but that was just the guy you used to play against at, DC United, that now is, has a phenomenal role in Major League Soccer. To Garth Argoway, who I played Region 2 soccer with, that we traveled to England, and that was the coolest trip ever. We're 14 years old, 14, 15, and Garth's in the back of the bus helped me with algebra, smartest dude in the world. And I still remember, when I see Garth, we chat from time to time, and he's obviously done so well, but one of my memories goes back to the back of a bus and him basically helping me do algebra. And now he's, one of the top executives in our country. Yeah. And so I give you a lot of those stories, but yeah, it's really fun. It's a lot of reflecting. I do like to reflect, and we, when we get together with many of these guys, that's what a lot of times we'll talk about, because our jobs do get very serious in so many ways that we can kind of digress a little bit and just laugh about the times that we had, or the struggles that we had, or just the purity of maybe the era that we grew up in that is different than today. And it's a fun thing to see so many guys do so well in today's in the landscape all across. Like you said, the MLS has been, what's been so phenomenal is obviously all the different things that have come around through it, but all the jobs and all the opportunities it's created.
Yeah.
For you to have your, the position you have, and all of us to be kind of intertwined in it and we have so many guys that are in the league doing different things that are not on a technical side, but on the business side. And that's cool too, because everyone's part of it and everyone's building it. And we all can take a lot of pride, as you mentioned, seeing what it started when you were 10 and what San Jose looks like today. So it's a different team.
Well, Coach, I know you've got stuff to get to, so I will let you go, but I appreciate your time. I hope I can bug you again for an interview soon. And again, man, keep up the great work, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Thank you.